And welcome to Helicopter Pilot Study Group number 5. My name is John LeDrew. I'm the host of this group. For those of you that are new here, this is a place for helicopter pilots to present and learn about aviation topics related to rotorcraft. We started this for us to have a place to communicate and kind of work outside of our schools. 61 schools can be a challenge to get together and talk about some details in addition to 41, and then we have interviews and we have currencies and all sorts of things that in the pilot world that we want to kind of stay on top of these topics. So that's the point of this group. The format is simple. Members can choose an area of operation from the ACS or in a task and present it. Generally take about 30 minutes to present that task however you want to, whether it's whiteboard or slides, deck, however you want to do it. And then we'll take 10-15 minutes and discuss it generally. That presentation is then followed by that discussion. And the idea here is to master the knowledge through teaching and following a similar approach as if you were presenting to a DPE, new students, currency, interviews, etc. And today we have a slight deviation from the typical format. Michael Triana, an Army POC or PIC Blackhawk aviator, 10 years in service, has been deployed multiple times. He's got a list of accolades, and he's joining us today. He's going to do a presentation about IMC, IFR Flight, and instrument rating. And we're going to try to keep bingo fuel around about an hour and 20 minutes. We'll follow a similar format than what we would do in the normal group, where we'll let Michael present. So if you guys wouldn't mind muting your microphones and then taking notes. Any questions that you have, jot them down, throw them in the chat, and then we'll address them after Michael's presentation, and we'll take some time and kind of go over those things. So with that, I'll let Michael get started on his presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, John. So good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Triana, and I'll be going over the basics of IFR Flight today. To give you some background on myself, I'm a Chief Warrant Officer 3 with the 1st Air Cavalry Brigade out of Fort Hood, Texas. I'm a pilot in command in the Blackhawk, as well as a Air Mission Commander, Aviation Mission Survivability Officer, and Aviation Liaison Officer. Although I am not an instructor pilot or a instrument examiner, I'm a commercially rated instrument pilot and designated primary unit trainer. To translate all of that, I pick up where our instructor pilots live off, and I can do everything but evaluate. I'm responsible for ensuring that our junior aviators receive quality training and continue to progress into combat aviators. So now that you know a little bit about me, let me turn my camera off and we'll focus on the presentation. All right, so topics of discussion for today. So why train to fly IFR? Making the decision to file IFR, planning an IFR flight, conducting an IFR flight, and then we'll end with an open discussion. So getting a commercially instrument rating is not cheap for civilian pilots, and it's something that many Army aviators take for granted. In this lesson, I hope to show you the life-saving and career-expanding benefits that come with it being instrument rated, as well as a very basic breakdown of what goes into planning and conducting an instrument flight. By no means is this supposed to be a comprehensive guide to IFR flight, nor is it intended to be a lecture. I encourage you to ask clarifying questions throughout this lesson, but I also request that you hold in-depth questions for the open discussion at the end. So why train to fly IFR? Army pilots were not always trained to fly IFR. Reading Mike Novosels's book, Dust Off, he talks a bit about setting up the instrument flight training program for one of his units back in the 60s. During his time in Vietnam, he was one of only a few aviators in his company that was instrument rated, which allowed him to conduct a daring rescue of a wounded Special Forces soldier one stormy night. For that action, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and his instrument training was pivotal in accomplishing that mission. Today, Army regulations state that every flight that can be conducted on an IFR flight plan should be, though in reality, we don't train IFR as often as we should. So why train IFR anyway if we don't use the skills regularly? Let's go over a few things here, some good reasons why. So, one of the biggest differences would be inadvertent meteorological conditions and instrument meteorological conditions. Routine operations versus an emergency. Flying in IMC is like swimming. If you're properly prepared for it, you're probably having a nice, relaxing day. If you unexpectedly find yourself in it, you're either fighting for your life or extremely uncomfortable. If you are properly trained on how to fly in instrument meteorological conditions, your odds of survival go up exponentially. Even without proper training, you still run the risk of spatial disorientation if you're flying in and out of the clouds. This is made worse by pilots not wanting to admit the reality of the situation that they're in, that they've gone inadvertent. You're not going to miraculously break out in a few seconds, and every moment wasted puts you in greater danger. You need to commit to IMC as soon as you punch into the clouds, and well trained instrument pilots have the best chance of success when doing so. So, if you do become an instrument qualified pilot, you need to practice often. At a bare minimum, in a 6-month period, you must perform 6 instrument approaches, perform holding procedures and tasks, and perform the task of intercepting and tracking courses through the use of navigational electronic systems. Having the skills to operate by instrument flight rules opens more options to you as a pilot and will set you apart from your peers. If you look at the differences on the screen between the types of VFR and IFR, a competent instrument rated pilot is capable of operating in conditions a VFR pilot would not dare to. In the next section, we'll discuss the decision making process of when to file IFR and what resources are available to help you make that decision. Regardless of if you're flying or on the ground, the best time to decide to file IFR is before you find yourself in the clouds. An instrument rated pilot can fly on days VFR pilots are grounded and can even decide to open an IFR flight plan if conditions deteriorate. All of this starts with good pre mission planning and getting a good weather brief. To guide our lesson today, we will use this scenario to frame the decision making process that an Army aviator goes through when planning an IFR flight. First, we will discuss the weather, planning resources we use, and some similar tools available to civilian pilots. So, in the grand scheme of maneuver that we're looking at today, we're going to be flying from Austin up to Waco. The VIP movement here, it's a bit of flavor text, but say you're moving about 10 passengers, and during your mission planning process, you see that the weather is going to be deteriorating upon your estimated time of departure from Austin. So, since you have the option to file for IFR, you've decided to leave nothing to chance and to plan for it. Talking a little bit about military weather products, Army aviators rely on 3 main weather products to conduct their mission planning. We start with 5-day forecast well in advance of mission execution, and then check the mission execution forecast the day of the mission. Lastly, the 175-1 weather brief is our specific mission briefing product for IFR flights, though they may sometimes be used for long-distance VFR flights. In the event that METARs, TAFs, or other civilian weather reporting disagrees with our weather products, the SWOs win that argument. We can only use official military products for planning and execution. Before planning a flight, an Army aviator will start by looking at the 5-day forecast and get an idea of what they're expecting for the day of their flight. This allows the decision to be made in advance whether to file VFR or IFR. While the mission execution forecast is primarily used for VFR flights, it's also a useful tool for IFR flights when determining if your plan is feasible for that day. As we saw earlier on the slides, instrument conditions such as low IFR may take those ceilings below what we can even file for IFR. However, you get that in advance by checking the forecast. Checking the forecast also allows you to be aware of forecasted conditions that may affect your plan and allow you to ask your briefer about them when you call for an official brief. You can do this as well as a civilian pilot. Your 175-1 is your official weather briefing from the SWO. Sorry. It can be requested days in advance to be ready in your inbox when you show up for a flight. It is a requirement for all IFR flight plans, but may also be used for VFR cross-country flights to gain better situational awareness. A weather brief is mandatory for all military flights and is valid for 1 hour and 30 minutes after issuance. Unfortunately, civilians are not able to use the same products as military aviators, but there are still many good options for checking the weather before you fly. Aviation Weather Center, FlightOS Flight Services, more commonly known as 1-800 Weather Brief, and FAA Weather Cams are all great options for you. For Flight Weather is also a good option if you decide to pay for it. The Aviation Weather Center offers pre-duty weather briefings from their homepage under the Tools drop-down menu. Regardless if you are planning a VFR or IFR flight, this is an excellent free tool available to you to gain better situational awareness before you even show up for your flight. This allows you to have a better conversation with your weather briefer when you call for that weather brief. So, would you fly on that? Good IFR flight is all about preparation, and most of that is knowing what weather to expect. If you know what weather is going to do, you can plan accordingly and for the worst case scenario. So once again, would you fly on that? Because I did. And it was an excellent flight. That was one of my instrument evaluations when I was in Korea. Next section, I'll break down exactly how we plan for an IFR flight. Checking the weather is the first step of planning any flight. For VFR flights, it's often as simple as go or no-go criteria, but planning an IFR flight requires taking a much deeper look at the weather. In this section, we'll discuss not only weather planning minimums, but also instrument approach procedure selection and flight route selection. Now that we know a bit about what we use to check the weather, let's take a look at our VIP transport scenario again. I've kept the weather conditions simple for this scenario and presented them in an easy-to-read format. Let's see if we can answer these 3 questions with the 1-3-5 rule on the next slide. Weather planning minimums, or as I like to remember it, the weather worm sends weathergrams. So 1-3-5, can I file for the approach? Do I need an alternate? And can I use this as an alternate? For the 1, do I have legal weather to file for the approach I intend to fly? Will I be able to land there? For 3, if I need an alternate, is the weather good enough on arrival? Is the procedure flyable without radar vectors from ATC? And is the NavAid actively monitored for faults or malfunction? Now, this NavAid monitor portion does not necessarily apply to GPS approaches. I'll discuss this a little later, but we monitor that in a different way. If I don't break out on my primary approach, is my alternate a safe and reliable approach procedure? So, noting the GPS portion under weathergrams, you can definitely use a GPS approach for your alternate, but only if you haven't used it as your primary approach. We want to build in as much redundancies and backups as we can. Our chart supplements and our instrument approach procedures. So how do we use our weather planning minimums? And what are we looking at to determine if they are met? The examples on this page are from Draughton Miller's Regional in Central Texas. I remember the sections of an instrument planning procedure with the mnemonic, marginal pilots plan profile landings at airports. Notice that the alternate not authorized, or ANA, in the pilot briefing section correlates to the NavAids being listed as unmonitored on the chart supplement. Though this is not always a direct correlation, in this case, it does. As I mentioned on the previous slide, monitoring does not apply to RNAV approaches. This is because we as pilots monitor RNAV through RAIM, RMP, and proper sequencing between RMPs. Now that we've clarified what we're looking for, let's take a look at our intended approaches. Answering the questions of can I file and do I need an alternate? Our VIP and his staff are looking to fly into McGregor Exec in Waco. Currently, the UH-16 Blackhawk is not capable of flying for a LPV or VNAV precision approach, which provides vertical guidance. Instead, we will have to plan for the LNAV non-precision approach, which only gives us an approach course. Our weather minimums for this approach are 401, which is 600 feet below the expected cloud ceilings upon arrival. As mentioned in the planning minimums, we can reduce that visibility by 1/2, and that's unique to helicopter pilots. We cannot, however, reduce visibility by 1/2 on copter approaches. Since the weather is expected to deteriorate below the required 800, 1.5, within the hour of our arrival, we must select an alternate airfield and approach procedure. NavAids will not be directly monitored with regards to monitoring on an RNAV approach. Predictive RAIM or RAIM light is how that would be satisfied. So can I use this as an alternate? So this is the VOR DME 32 into Waco. 10 miles away from McGregor Exec is Waco Regional. Though the cloud ceilings are expected to be lower at our time of arrival, they hold steady throughout the hour past our arrival. Though there is an ILS approach at Waco Regional that would get us down to 201, the initial approach fix is 50 miles away and thus too far to practically file for. Though we could expect radar vectors to that, planning for that distance would likely eat into our IFR reserve of 30 minutes. Since the VOR 32 meets all of our criteria for an alternate, we'll plan for this approach as a backup. Going back to our VIP scenario, so now that we've taken a look at our approaches, how do we get from Austin to McGregor Exec? First, we need to check the standard instrument departures leaving Austin and find one that'll set us up for going into CWK. Though it is not strictly required to use a standard instrument departure, you have to annotate on your flight plan that you are specifically not going to use one. So that procedure is generally frowned upon. Standard instrument departures are, as well as standard area, terminal area arrival procedures, help to efficiently funnel traffic in and out of congested airspace, so it's always a good idea to use one. Our first approach into McGregor Exec is GPS, so we'll plan for the Sabre 3, which is an RNAV departure. After that, we'll determine which altitude is appropriate for our direction of travel. I remember this by, even in the west, the east is odd, meaning that we choose even altitudes if we're heading west and odd altitudes if we're heading east. The Sabre 3 departure takes us up to 5,000 feet, so we'll plan for that on our initial climb out. However, we will expect 4,000 feet heading west to Barba, then 3,200 to Icy-Eyed per the initial approach procedure. Barba is our initial approach fix for the RNAV runway 35 into McGregor Executive. This is the standard instrument approach, or standard instrument departure we will use out of Austin, the Sabre 3 departure. Though you are not required to use SIDS, you have to specifically state that you're not going to use it, and it's best practice to do so. With the winds out of 340 at 16, we can expect runway 36 to be in use. According to takeoff minimums, we will use modified standard minimums with a climb out of 240 feet per nautical mile till we reach 2,600 feet. At our destination, we'll use the RNAV 35 into McGregor Exec. Note the 2 points we could use as an initial approach fix, Icy-Eyed and Barba. We'll file for Barba as it allows us to get lower before arrival on our final approach course. It also allows us to skip the procedure turn published on this initial approach procedure. Another point to note is the minimum sector area on the bottom right-hand corner of the plan view. The minimum sector altitude, on an instrument approach procedure is the lowest altitude that provides at least 1,000 feet of obstacle clearance within a specified sector. Typically a 25 nautical mile radius centered around on a navigation aid or waypoint. For RNAV approaches, such as this one, the MSA is centered on the runway threshold or missed approach point, MAP. So with this instrument departure that we've selected, why would we not choose Centex 8 since that's a more direct route? As we saw on the previous slide, our route of flight is about 90 something nautical miles. However, if we were to file for Centex 8, that would require us to go from CWK Vortac on that radial direct to ACT Vortac, then backtrack to our initial approach fix and proceed inbound from there. So it may seem like we're flying out of the way instead of flying directly, but due to the routing and the requirements for this departure, it is more reliable to plan for the RNAV departure. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't request vectors en route, but IFR flight plans must be planned in the event of lost commo, something that we can save for a future date. The DD Form 1801 DoD International Flight Plan is the standard military flight plan. Missed approach procedure to the alternate adds about another 20 minutes of flight time on our flight plan here, leaving an estimated of 53 minutes of endurance remaining, well above the required 30-minute fuel reservoir for the flight. As we filed for here, we're expecting it's going to take us about an hour and 10 minutes to do this, and we have an endurance of 2 hours and 23 minutes that we would have calculated with our performance planning card. And for an IFR flight, it's 90% planning, 10% flying. It's often said that prior proper planning prevents pretty poor performance, and that's doubly true for IFR flight. I like to tell the pilots I mentor to be a diligent planner, so that way you can be a lazy pilot. By that I mean that if you front load the work of mission planning and go into an IFR flight well prepared, you won't even break a sweat. Now that we've gone over our pre-mission planning, let's take a look at the flow of events in an IFR flight. The order of events, IFR flights are more procedural than a VFR flight, to the point that you could rehearse every step outside of the cockpit and have it go exactly the same way on your flight. Though an IFR flight often follows what you planned, you are under positive control throughout the entire flight and must comply with all instructions given by ATC. The only exception to this is if you are unable to comply and you must communicate that to ATC. That being said, let's walk through the steps on this screen. Pre-flight, NOTAMs, weather, flight plan. Though this is not a set order of events, this is what I recommend. Pre-flight your aircraft first to identify any deficiencies that may prevent you from flying. Check NOTAMs to ensure nothing will affect your planned flight through departure, en route, and arrival. A diligent aviator will have already checked the weather before arriving for their flight. This is where you obtain your updated or official weather brief. Not only does this allow you to adjust your takeoff time for your flight plan due to weather conditions, but it also starts a clock. Once again, your weather brief is void 1 hour and 30 minutes after being issued, but can be updated at any time prior to takeoff to restart that clock. Lastly, you submit or update your flight plan. I saved this for the last step to ensure that my flight plan is registered in the system. Too many times I've been at Fly, ready to receive my clearance or taxi instructions, only to be told by ATC that they don't have my flight plan. Regardless of the reason, we as Army aviators always blame flight ops. After you've completed these steps, it's time for a crew brief and get ready to fly. After briefing your crew on the mission overview, risk assessment, required items, analysis of the aircraft, crew actions duties and responsibilities, and general crew duties, you can now begin the process of starting the aircraft and performing your equipment checks. On an IFR flight, you would check your navigational equipment, such as your VOR, TACAN, and GPS nav database. If the flight is expected to encounter any icing conditions, You would also test your de-ice and anti-ice equipment. During your comms checks, you would test all of your radios, receive the current ATIS information, set up your instruments to fly your planned departure procedure, and contact clearance delivery for your IFR clearance. We follow the craft format for writing down our clearance, and most of that information can be pre-filled in advance. This is what your IFR clearance would look like. This is the craft acronym we use to prepare to copy our IFR clearance. We could fill out most of this based on what we filed for on our flight plan and fill in the rest from clearance delivery. Usually you will only need to write down your transponder code. That conversation would sound something like this. First, we would check ATIS for winds, runway in use, cloud ceilings, and altimeter settings. ATIS information we have received is PAPA. Austin clearance delivery, Army Copter 20069 with information from PAPA requesting IFR clearance. Army 20069 advise when ready to copy. Army 069 ready to copy. Army 069, you are cleared to McGregor Exec via Sabre 3 departure on climb out, fly heading 355 and expect vectors for Munch. Climb and maintain 5,000 feet, then proceed as filed to McGregor Exec. Contact departure on 127.225, squawk 4321. You would then read back that clearance verbatim. After you've read it back, clearance delivery confirms readback correct or provides corrections. After receiving your clearance, before calling ground for taxiing instructions, you're going to set your instruments up for departure. The UH-60 Blackhawk has a flight management system that is certified for civilian instrument flight. You would program your flight with the departure procedure from your starting airport, en route GPS waypoints, and initial approach procedure for your destination airfield. In this case, that would be the Sabre 3 departure out of Austin directly into Barba for the initial approach fix for the RNAV 35 into McGregor Exec. Once your route is set, you configure your flight director for the Sabre 3 departure by presetting the barometric altimeter for 5,000 feet as assigned, and the heading hold to 355 degrees for the climb out. For our clearance, we know to expect radar vectors to Munch on climb out. On the flight director, we would also select from our nav source to follow the GPS waypoints on our flight plan. We would set the ground control frequency on our radios to get taxi instructions, but have the frequencies for tower and departure written down on our knee board and be ready to input when directed to freak change. It is a practice of many experienced aviators to monitor both UHF and VHF frequencies for each controlling agency to increase situational awareness. It helps prevent your radio call from stepping on or getting stepped on by someone using the other frequency. Lastly, you double check to make sure that your transponder, ADSB, and altimeter are all properly set. If you were anticipating flight into icing conditions, this is where you would turn on your anti-ice equipment. After calling ground for your taxi instructions and repeating back your taxiway routing, runway assignment, and hold short instructions, you will proceed to holding short of the active runway. At this point, you will freak change to tower, call holding short of runway 36 in this case, and wait to be cleared onto the runway for departure. When cleared onto the runway, ensure you perform a hover power check to confirm your performance planning before takeoff. When cleared for departure, you will begin your takeoff by maintaining power as required to climb at or above the minimum climb rate for the departure procedure. The standard climb rate is 200 feet per nautical mile, but the Sabre 3 departure states to climb 240 feet per nautical mile till 2,600 feet, if taking off from runway 36. On takeoff, you must maintain an accelerative attitude and keep the aircraft in trim after passing through ETL. Though some pilots like to use the go-around button on our flight director, I prefer a more deliberate approach. I prefer a level acceleration to 80 knots heading down the runway, since we've got an entire runway to be able to use. We set that airspeed before climbing at a rate of 800 feet per nautical mile. This allows me to couple my flight director to airspeed and then set my climb rate. Not only does this allow me to manipulate one axis of change at a time, it also allows me to set my flight director for climb out before entering into the clouds and transition solely to flying off of instruments. This also gives me the entire length of the runway to abort my takeoff in the event of any sort of emergency. After performing a flawless ITO as just described, you will maintain your airspeed, V speed, and heading on your climb out to 5,000 feet. On climb out, tower will frequency change you to departure, which will sound something like this. Starting with tower, Army Copter 20069, frequency change to departure. Army 069, freak change departure. Austin departure, Army Copter 20069, 2,600 feet, climbing to 5,000. Army Copter 20069, radar contact, continue climb to 5,000 feet, right turn, heading 038, radar vectors for Munch. Austin departure, Army 069, climb to 5,000 feet, right turn, heading 038. And now we get to the point of level off checks. After we've conducted the standard instrument departure, starting from the top and working our way down, we begin checking out the OAT. When ambient air temperature is 4 degrees Celsius and below, and visible moisture is present, icing may occur. After checking the outside air temperature, we determine if we need to turn on any of our anti-ice or de-ice capabilities. Next, we'll check our nav source and ensure it's set correctly. If we were using a VOR or a TACAN for navigation, we would check and set the OBS or Omni Bearing Selection Control for the correct course to make sure that we are tracking correctly. Bearing pointers allow us to tune in VORs, TACANs, NDBs, or GPS waypoints in the flight management system and give us an arrow pointing in their direction on our horizontal situation indicator. Checking the flight director ensures that we're coupled up to the correct altitude, heading, airspeed, and navigation source. A systems check is done to make sure engines and rotors are in the green, their continuous limits. Cruise torque is noted specifically to help detect icing conditions. An increase of 20% torque in cruise flight due to ice accumulation may result in the loss of auto-rotational capabilities. COM radios are checked and set to current or expected frequencies. If using ground-based navigational aids, you tune their frequency and check that the Morse code transmission from the nav aid matches the published code. Most importantly, you initiate a fuel check to calculate your burn rate and fuel remaining. We would conduct all of these checks after leveling off at our cruising altitude on the en route portion of our flight. This will most likely occur between Munch and Sabre. Depending on how busy departure control is, we may stay with them until we reach Sabre, or we may be transferred to Houston Center, which is the air traffic control center in this area. After Sabre, we will be transferred to Waco Approach before arrival at our initial approach fix of Barba. Now that we're approaching the terminal area, we start thinking about doing our approach briefing. If you remember my mnemonic of marginal pilots plan profile landings at airports, we're going to brief largely from the margin and pilot briefing sections, but also discuss information from the profile view and landing minimums. An approach briefing would sound something like this. Today we'll be doing the RNAV 35 into McGregor exec. Our final approach course will be 353 on the RNAV 35. Radio frequencies, we'll get ATIS and we'll confirm that approach frequency. Our minimum descent altitude or decision altitude, 960 will be our MDA today, and missed approach point is 2.2 nautical miles after Barugo at the threshold of runway 35. For the missed approach, we will brief immediate actions, which is climb runway heading to 2,500 direct to Buildy, and then we'll perform our landing checks. We'll make sure that the tail wheel switch is locked, parking brake set, released, crew packs mission equipment secured, and we would update our performance considerations, making sure that we have power available once we reach our intended destination. Flying and initiating this instrument approach procedure. As you approach the terminal area, your initial approach fix is where you enter the instrument approach procedure. By BARBA, you should have freak changed over to Waco approach on 127.65. This is the controlling agency you will remain with throughout the approach, as this airfield has no control tower. Once you are established on the inbound course at an airfield that has a tower, they would change you over to tower at that time. By BARBA, you should be cleared for the minimum altitude of 3,200. If not, you can request it after passing BARBA. Since we filed for BARBA as our initial approach fix, we do not need to conduct a procedure turn upon arrival to ICI'd. Along this leg of the procedure, approach will likely ask you to report established inbound on the RNAV 35 after ICI'd. Once established and reported, Waco approach will clear you for the approach. Before you initiate the approach, you must be cleared for the approach on your final approach course and within the remain within distance listed in the plan view, 25 nautical miles for this case. Once those factors are met, you may initiate the approach after you reach the final approach fix of HPSG. After HPSG, you may descend to 1,300 until you reach Brugo. After Brugo, you may descend to your minimum descent altitude of 960 feet. Do not descend below 960 till you have the runway, approach lights, or landing area in sight, and your aircraft is in a safe position to land. If you do not break out by the runway threshold of runway 35 and have the runway environment in sight, you must conduct the missed approach procedure. Should you have to conduct a missed approach, you will contact Waco Approach again on climb out and advise Army Copter 20069 missed approach on the RNAV 35 at McGregor Exec 1000 climbing to 2500. And last but not least, don't forget to close out your flight plan. If you are landing at a towered airport, you can request the control tower to close you out. If you're on short final on approach in VMC, you can request to cancel IFR and proceed visually. However, if you are unable to do either of those, make sure you contact your local flight service station covering that area, 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF, or close out on ForeFlight if you have it. You must close out your flight plan within 30 minutes of your estimated arrival time. This can be tricky at the very beginning of your flight if you are exceptionally delayed. If you do not close out within that 30 minutes, search and rescue procedures are initiated. Now, to be fair, they usually give you a call first before launching the fleet. And though we have covered the basics of IFR flight in today's lesson, we've only just scratched the surface. There are many more things you may need to consider when planning or conducting operations under IFR. And some of these topics I recommend for your future study, listed here on this slide. And finally, folks, learn to love the clouds. But remember that IMC is dangerous if you don't plan or train for it. A friend of mine and I were discussing this quote at work, and he passed this on to me for us to use in this lesson. And this is from a diving instructor that he used to work with before he became a pilot in the Army. He's quoted as saying, "To call what we do dangerous is to call us incompetent. There are risks, but we are trained to be excellent risk managers." I think that applies perfectly to aviation as well as diving. With that concludes my presentation. We'll open it up for discussion here. I'm happy to hang around, talk about this, but thanks for having me. Hope you learned something. Keep training.
That was terrific, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I'll start with questions. I have one. And then we'll open it up for some others should they have some. So my first question is 91.175 operation below DA or MDA. It says,
Yes.
except as where provided, is applicable. No pilot may operate an aircraft except military aircraft of the U.S. So there's a couple of things that
Mhm.
we can go below the MDA, but what is it? What is it exclusively for the U.S. military that allows you to go those under those MDAs?
So as discussed there, with on an instrument approach with the minimum descent altitude or decision altitude, needing to have the runway environment in sight and being a safe position to land, we do have certain systems that allow us to decelerate, but we are trained not to go below those altitudes till we have those criteria met. Now, one thing that I am aware of that's different from military to civilian is, and this might be pertaining to what you're asking, is that we do not need to have reported conditions
Hmm.
for breakout at the airport for us to initiate the approach. So it might be that we get down to the decision altitude or MDA, and if clouds were reported at 200, but we actually break out at 400, then we're allowed to go below and land the aircraft at that time.
Yeah, I think that was my question. Like, you guys can do
Mhm.
it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Man, neat.
But again, we're still held to that standard of like, don't land the aircraft unless you can see where you're landing.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Um, I will ask one then, since there's nobody else popping up right now. So does your weather brief use the same NOAA resources that ours do, or are you guys using a lot of like proprietary military satellites and with military weather resources?
So I've taken a look at our forecasters as they go through their briefing process, and this is something that I got a behind the scenes look at last time I was in Europe in Romania. They though they do have official resources that they use, they'll often supplement that with taking a look at Windy,
Mm.
just to get an idea as to what's going on there. But they do have a lot of official government resources that they rely upon. And yes, though they are checking Windy, um, they can't use that specifically for a briefing. So I don't
Mm.
remember there being any NOAA resources that they checked. I think it's a little bit more proprietary, maybe feeding in directly from those sensors.
Yeah, it's funny. They're probably just cross-referencing Windy, huh? To what the
Absolutely,
resources
yeah.
they have. Yeah, so Windy's that good of an app,
Mhm.
really. I know
Yeah,
you had
yeah.
mentioned that
We've
before.
used it quite a bit
Yeah.
to kind of get an idea as to what things are doing and kind of going like back and forth. Like, I mean, this is what the SWO is saying, but like, I don't see that here. And that's kind of where in that briefing process that even if civilian products disagree with what our briefer's saying, we got to go with what they're saying.
Yeah, for is by protocol or just legal reasons or
Uh, per the regulation, yeah, for
regulations. Yeah,
legal reasons for us, we can't rely on any civilian products for a weather brief.
yeah.
So even if we're flying cross country, as I did one time from Fort Drum down to El Paso, we were having to look up the number for the local weather officer and get a brief from them. So
Yeah,
we got to go with what our guys give us.
good. Well, I have a couple comments. I really I like the
Hmm.
scenario that you um, showed us, and then when looking at your IFR chart, it did seem like going direct to essentially on that Victor Airway, whatever that number was, seemed logical. But
Hmm.
the fact that you kind of
Yeah.
broke it down and said why you wouldn't go that way, you don't want to have to turn back in, and going around made a lot of
Hmm.
sense. That was cool. I appreciate the ATC comms. Someone who hasn't flown a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
IFR plans, or maybe just a couple at this point, having those
Mhm.
that like repetitive, just sort of just hearing it is good. And
Yeah.
we can hear that on live ATC, right? And maybe someone else can chime in, but we can hear those approach or
Yeah.
those IFR requests on live ATC, right?
I do believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'll have
At
to
the
listen
very
to those more.
least, recordings from the last 24 hours.
Yeah, it's true. I should listen to those more. Just get familiar with the vernacular. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really like.
There is actually there is a YouTube channel that I used as I was
Mm,
training to be a pilot in command. I think it's VAS Aviation or something like that.
mhm,
They've got a lot of vignettes and videos that show that conversation, that back and forth
mm,
between pilots and ATC, and that really helped me get an idea for sort of the flow and the syntax of what the controllers are looking for. And as I've been told, and as I'll tell my guys now, if you're a fan of role playing games, RPGs, computer games, you think of ATC as NPCs. They understand a set of instructions or responses, and if you give them the answers to those sets and instructions, you're going to have a lot better conversation.
mm,
So knowing what they're going to ask and having that answer ready to go
mhm.
makes things go so much faster,
Yeah.
and they'll not get mad at you if you're in busy airspace.
Yeah, that's always a little stressful, right? Having those guys potentially frustrated with you. Will you drop that in the
Oh
chat?
yeah.
That YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll take a look here in just a bit, and I'll put it in the Max Performance text channel.
Yeah, great, great. All right, who else has any questions? Anybody?
Yeah, open forum.
Open forum. I like the MPPPLA acronym. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we generally use. I don't. I haven't briefed a plate in a while, so I don't recall what my
Hmm.
plate briefings were. Anybody in here have any
Yeah.
additional plate briefing acronyms that you like? Sorry, I don't know of another one. I remember there was one. Do you recall a different one, Michael?
Mm, hold on one sec here. Um, Marginal pilots plan profile landings at airports. No, no,
Um,
that was actually one that I kind of came up with on my
oh,
own,
really?
just to kind of keep it in my head there. Yeah,
Um,
and they used to not even have the margins in the briefing section there.
mm.
That was something they answered recently.
Have you heard of Martha? Missed
Martha.
approach, altitudes,
No,
radios,
what's that
time.
one?
Yeah, missed approach, altitudes, radios, time,
Mhm.
heading, airspeed. Seems illogical. Maybe that's more
Okay, yeah,
fixed wing.
I could see that being good specifically for a missed approach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wire, which is weather, instruments, radios, emergencies. But yours I like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
MPPLA. I think I'm gonna incorporate that into my IFR training. And when someone asks me, "Where did you get that acronym for your approach plate?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, funny you should ask. I got a guy."
Yeah. Heck yeah, man.
Heck yeah. Um,
So one thing that I'd really like to focus on, like with doing this presentation, I know that like talking with my fellow Army aviators, um, and those that are kind of starting to dabble in the civilian side of things, we really take our instrument training for granted. Looking at just how much that costs for not only to get it but to maintain it. Um, I mean, hell, man, I flew 4.5 hours in the sim today. That's like if I was in a R-44, that would have been $500 right there, and that was just a regular Wednesday for me.
yeah.
But it helps a lot having access to all of these resources to be able to stay current on instruments, to be able to practice, and um, and I think the biggest advantage of all of that is being able to react to an inadvertent IMC. Taking a little bit into like some of the resources that you pointed me towards, like the what was that 58 seconds to live,
Mm-hmm.
that video,
Yeah.
and seeing how they went over that, and then looking at the statistics for um, how many people actually survive inadvertent meteorological conditions. It was shocking to me because there's for us we practice those procedures quite often. We'll be out in the training area. It's like, you know what, you just went inadvertent. What are you going to do, PI?
Yeah.
And so we execute the procedures, and we even practice it in the aircraft. Having the skills to be able to do that is huge. I remember first time getting into instrument flight, going through flight school. Man, I was terrible at it. this this is all the result of many years of training and study to really get it dialed in. But when you learn to fly visually, it focusing just purely on the instruments, wrapping your mind around of what turning one direction versus the other should actually look like um, on my artificial horizon. Like that was getting that correlated. I remember was difficult for me, um, but but it takes time. It takes practice, and it's a life saving skill to have. One of the very real examples of this is the Kobe Bryant crash.
Yeah.
The aircraft kept scud running, the pilot, and he was flying a instrument rated aircraft. If he itself had been instrument rated, if he had not been in denial of the fact that he was inadvertent or about to go inadvertent, everyone on that aircraft, Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and the pilot, they'd be alive today. So it's an entirely preventable tragedy just by having good training.
Yeah, and you know, the opportunity, the amount of time you guys get, and you're getting paid to fly too, right? So it's I think, like
Hmm.
you said, the simulator opportunities. I think I see a lot of value in them for that, and I've heard other pilots reflect that too. I did get some sim time in a it was a star sim,
Hmm.
and it was immensely helpful, just to be to just to see what it looked like, um, in an IMC condition. So, um, anybody
Hmm.
on here has some recommendations or some resources for sims, please throw them out. And the school that
Yeah.
I went to, that I used their sim, which was pretty, I mean, still expensive in comparison, but compared to burning fuel, it's considerably less. It was at the Flight School of Orlando. They have a couple simulators actually that are affordable, and you have to have a couple $1,000 deposit there, but you can burn off a couple $1,000 pretty quickly in their sims, and they've got great sim training too.
Yeah.
So that was one resource that
Yeah.
I've used in the past, and always looking for more.
Hmm.
If you
One
ever
thing I
want to
did note
invite us
from
civilians
Part
to come,
91
yeah.
about maintaining your instrument currency, you can apply that simulator time to that and use that to meet your 6 month minimums.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking about getting in some fixed wings for that purpose. I mean, I've done it already,
Hmm.
probably like 8 hours worth of like night instrument flying in a Archer.
Oh yeah.
I don't really know how to fly airplanes, but it's pretty easy in comparison.
Yeah.
But you know, sitting there
Yeah.
with an
Yeah.
instructor, it's pretty helpful. Getting the habit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, you and I could just chat all day, but anybody else have anything they want to add?
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate it.
One thing, I'll just kind of wrap this up by reminding everybody that somebody want to
Uh,
chime in?
hey, hey, John. Yeah. Jay was talking. I don't know if you've got the chat muted or something like that.
Oh, let me see. I don't.
But please, Jay, go on.
I have him mute.
Um,
There you
like I said, great job. Um, One thing on the Kobe Bryant crash with Arisabayan.
Oh yeah.
So the ship was IFR rated, but they weren't legally allowed to fly it IFR. It wasn't on the certificate.
Yeah.
And what happened with Ara was he, he was caught before flying
Mm.
IFR when he shouldn't have been. So
Oh, okay.
he knew that he was going to get in trouble,
Mm.
and so he didn't want to self-report,
Hmm.
and he got himself in a very dangerous situation.
That's a sad
So
reality. That's a sad
that's
reality.
Yeah.
what came out of that is was the whole, don't worry about, the paperwork. I guess after that, helicopter pilot network came out and said, land and lift. Don't worry about the
Absolutely.
paperwork. Just if you land the bird, put it in the parking lot, put it anywhere you can. It's better to
Yeah.
deal with the repercussions than, you know, kill yourself and a bunch of people.
Yeah. And that's
So
exactly what they train us in the military, because we worry about getting an ass chewing, or worst case, having our pilot and command orders taken from us, due to improper planning, poor decision making. But with all of that being said, whenever we have our safety vignettes, our yearly spatial disorientation training, they emphasize to us, like, hey, you can come back from having your PC orders taken. You can deal with an ass chewing. It might suck for a little bit, but you'll be alive to fly another day.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of what the situation may be, um, land the aircraft or commit to IMC if you are instrument rated as a civilian pilot. For us as Army aviators, we have zero excuse.
Question.
yeah.
Yeah, what you got?
How much can you rely on autopilots? I've only flown R-22 or 44 once or twice. So how much can you use the autopilot, or how much do you rely on it for these approaches or
Gotcha.
flying
Okay.
IFR?
So for our yearly instrument evaluation, we're required to fly one approach entirely coupled up to the flight director, the autopilot, and one to be flown uncoupled. And this ties exactly into your question in that we do not trust it 100%. Um, Mike, Michelle, as we may call her sometimes, because we fly UH-60 Mikes, um, she's got a mind of her own sometimes, and the flight director doesn't care. She'll pull the guts out of her engines, climb to the sky, overspeed the rotor. It requires constant maintenance, management by the pilots to make sure that you're staying within your limits, and more importantly, that the flight director is not taking you someplace that you don't intend to go. So while we do rely on the autopilot for simple things such as a heading hold, altitude hold, setting our vertical speed for a climb or a descent, pre-selecting the altitude that we want to level off at. When it comes to coupling up to things like the flight management system, which is going to guide us along a flight plan and instrument conditions, we're watching that the entire time, especially if we're flying GPS. That kind of ties back to what I was saying, that you don't need to worry about nav aids being monitored for RNAV approaches, because we as pilots are constantly monitoring the system to make sure that we're within that AMP and RMP, what is expected, and the average is supposed to be for us to remain on that GPS course. So we rely on it. We trust it to fly the aircraft, but we still manually make takeoffs and landings, and we're constantly watching it.
Awesome, and thank you so much for your presentation. Really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here and glad you liked it. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to add? Great questions, you guys. Great feedback.
Absolutely.
Well, we're nearing bingo fuel. Unless anybody pops in, I'm just going to kind of wrap this up by saying we do this weekly. Keep an eye out for the invitations. Come prepared with a presentation. If you have anything you want to present, feel free to use this platform to do that. It's going to be, we're just going to listen in, hear what you have to say, comments just like we were doing now, and then on to the next presenter. Doing this once a week. So invite your friends, students, colleagues, other pilots, even a fixed wing guy if you want. But we'd be happy to have you in the group. Join us weekly. Incredible, Michael. That was fantastic. Thank you for putting that together.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Glad y'all
John.
liked it.
Before we go, man, we got this terrible echo for some reason. I got it on my end. But I got that FAA safety seminar or webinar approved, I guess, or it's already in the air. I'll get that linked out to y'all, and I guess we somehow develop the presentation, the aerodynamics presentation, and I changed it to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully that works.
Yeah, that's great
for
for
everybody.
me. Yeah, great for me. And I'll send you my deck on that. I'm going to talk about retreating.
That's on the
blade
weekend, correct?
Yeah, it's in February, the 21st of February at 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go ahead and send at least you two the link, and then everybody else can sign up through FAA safety.
And we get wings credit, yeah?
Yeah, excellent. Nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to, on this one, it's go through Zoom, but on the next one, maybe we can attempt to put it through Discord. I'm not sure the FAA like Discord so much, but we'll see,
Yeah, no, that's great.
I see the value in Zoom, but I think this is a more accessible platform for people.
Yeah, so far so good. I'll send you my deck. I'll be talking about retreating blade stall for that.
Nice.
Cool, awesome.
I think I said that I'll be going over some of the aerodynamic phenomenon emergencies. I think I was thinking of some of the stuff I normally talk about for combat maneuvering flight, but I'll kind of tailor it more towards the civilian aviation side.
Throw in some of that combat stuff too. That would be fun to hear.
Sounds good. We'll do.
Yeah, that'll certainly keep it interesting.
All right. Well,
yep.
I'll add in some of the CMF stuff in there too.
Awesome stuff. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks again, Michael. See you guys next week.
Absolutely. Y'all take care.